Americans want gun reform. We know that from poll after poll after poll. 7 out of 10 Americans say that legislation to reduce gun violence should take precedence over protecting the rights of gun owners. A whopping 88% say background checks should be required for all gun sales. 67% want assault-style weapons banned. That's what Americans want. But here's what they're getting this week. The Supreme Court on Thursday struck down a New York law that placed limits on carrying guns outside the home. That New York law required people to demonstrate proper cause for carrying a handgun in public. The decision was 6-3, with the court's liberal justices dissenting. Writing for the majority, Justice Clarence Thomas wrote, "The Second and 14th Amendments protect an individual's right to carry a handgun for self-defense outside the home." In his dissent, Stephen Breyer wrote, "Since the start of this year, 2022, there have been 277 reported mass shootings, an average of more than one per day." This is the court's first major ruling on gun rights in more than a decade. In decisions in 2008 and 2010, the court established a nationwide right to keep a gun at home. Now, they've added a right to carry guns outside the home. New York Governor Kathy Hochul called the decision, quote, "frightful."
This decision isn't just reckless, it's reprehensible. It's not what New Yorkers want.
So that's what we got from the Supreme Court, something that New Yorkers and most Americans don't want. We're also expecting to get something from the Senate this week, as soon as Friday. It could pass its first major gun bill in decades. It strengthens background checks for certain buyers, and it allocates money for school safety and mental health programs. It helps fund red flag laws that make it easier to temporarily take weapons from those found to be dangerous. But the bill does not address any of the things that vast majority of Americans want, like universal background checks or limits on assault-style weapons. And maybe that's why it has the support from the Senate's top Republican.
The Democrats came our way and agreed to advance some common-sense solutions without rolling back rights for law-abiding citizens. The result is a product I'm proud to support.
So why is Mitch McConnell helping end a 3-decade cold snap when it comes to gun reform? Is this a new chapter? Or is he signing off on this so that Republicans don't have to touch gun laws for another 3 decades, while the court continues to expand on its interpretation of the Second Amendment? Joining me now, Megan Hatcher-Mays, Director of Democracy Policy at Indivisible, and Fred Guttenberg. His 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, was tragically killed in the 2018 Parkland school shooting. Since then, he has dedicated his life to pushing for gun safety legislation across the U.S. Welcome to you both. Megan, let's begin with you. The impact of this on this ruling. This decision concerned a New York gun law, but how many other states right now have similar laws, and how will those states be impacted if that stands?
Yeah, any state that has any sort of gun safety legislation on the books is at risk of having that overturned by the Supreme Court. So even though this case was about New York, other states, probably mostly blue states that have strict concealed carry laws or other strict gun ownership laws, are now at risk because the Supreme Court has now said, unless you can find some historical analog for this type of regulation that from the 1700s, when the Second Amendment was ratified, this will be presumptively unconstitutional, which is why New York's law was struck down and why a lot of other gun safety laws are now at risk. It also puts into question some of the provisions in the new Senate bill with more modern policy interventions, like the domestic abuser prohibition or the red flag laws. Those are relatively new policy choices that are also now at risk because there is no historical analog to Thomas Jefferson's time, and therefore Clarence Thomas and Alito and the rest of the conservatives on the Supreme Court might take issue with that. So the impact here is massive. It will absolutely lead to more guns on the street, even if they are possessed by law-abiding gun owners. Even the best-intentioned gun owner can make a mistake. This will only make gun safety more difficult to regulate at the state level, and it puts a lot of people at risk who just want to go to church or the grocery store or to school without being worried about gun violence.
So, Fred, to Megan's point, our founders didn't have to worry about rogue citizens running around committing mass murder in the colonies. As we see today here in the U.S., we're averaging a mass shooting a day, as Justice Breyer mentioned in his dissent. Backers of this law argue that getting rid of it, allowing more guns on the streets, would lead to higher crime. What's your reaction to that?
It will lead to higher crime. And listen, the writer of this opinion today, you use the term rogue citizens. His wife may be one of those rogue citizens as we speak. And so I am so crazed by the language that he used about historical things that are historically permissible. Because the truth is, Michael, you didn't have an existence of AR-15s back then. You didn't have an existence of ghost guns back then. You didn't have an existence of ammunition back when the Constitution was written. So are those things now free to be banned? I just don't get it. And this court on this issue moved away from states' rights in a way that will lead to more dead people. And tomorrow, on the issue of Roe v. Wade, they're likely to move in the direction of states' rights that will again lead to more dead people. I don't understand what they're doing, but it is deadly and dangerous.
Just so folks know, there's a little bit of construction going on behind Fred, so he's
outside
not
the building here. I apologize.
No, dude, I know you can't control for it, but we just want the audience to know, what is Fred doing?
Literally just started.
So, Megan, the last major decision from the court on guns was, 2010, when the justices said Americans had a right to keep firearms in the home. Now they've broadened that right to carrying guns outside the home. Do you see this possibly going further to expanding now? Not only can you carry your handgun, but now you can carry other weapons, other firearms outside the home.
I don't see why not. I don't know that Clarence Thomas, who wrote this opinion, put any real limits, and he does not distinguish at all between having a gun inside your house and having a gun outside. In his mind, these are the same, that the Second Amendment protects both of these rights in equal measure. It's interesting that a group of justices who claim to be originalists read the word individual into the Second Amendment, because the Second Amendment does not talk about an individual right to gun ownership or to an individual's right to carry a gun. They read that in. Scalia read that in Heller. And now it's been expanded not just to an individual's right to have guns inside your home, but an individual's right to carry them wherever you want, except for places that the court says are could be deemed sensitive areas, which of course includes courthouses, unsurprisingly. But that's basically where we're at. And to Fred's point about the historical analog, Thomas actually did go out of his way to make a distinction between a historical analog between gun regulations at the time and the historical analog between the types of weapons. So basically what Thomas did was a little carve out. He did a little tricky two-step where you need to find a historical analog for any gun regulation you want to pass. You do not need to find a historical analog for any weapon that you want to ban. So even though weapons have become more deadly over the course of time, the regulations are now not allowed to keep up with the deadliness of the guns that we are finding out on the street. So I really don't see a way that a court can get, or that, a state can get around this ruling and try to ban, say, AR-15s from concealed carry permits or other types of really deadly guns from flooding the streets. And the difference between this country and other countries is there are so many guns. There's so many guns. And today the Supreme Court just kind of said, we don't care. We don't care about that. Uvalde, Buffalo, none of that is relevant to our decision making. Instead, Alito threw out a couple of examples of Good Samaritans, this kind of made up thing that conservatives throw out about a Good Samaritan with a gun saving people's lives. There are many more examples of somebody concealed carrying harming the wrong person because they didn't have the context for what was going on. So this is a very scary time, and the court is really leading this country down a very, very dark path.
So, Fred, Megan has sort of set the narrative around the Supreme Court decision. I'm going to turn your attention to Capitol Hill and the legislation that's being considered after major shootings in Texas and New York. in California, Buffalo. How do you feel about the bill that's making its way through the Senate right now? Does it do enough? Does it need to do more? And what should we be expecting from it?
I apologize for the noise. The bill making its way is what I would call necessary but not sufficient. But it is what we are able to do at a time when we have a president who will sign the legislation, the House will pass it, and a Senate that is stuck at 50-50. Listen, Michael, my metric is simple. Will it save lives? Will it reduce instances of gun violence? And this bill will do that. But it's not enough. We have so much more to do. And sadly, this court may actually make this bill harder to put into full effect. And I hope I'm wrong on that. But we need these life-saving measures. My daughter's murder was predictable, but it was also preventable, and so are the others.